أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We can do better because it's hard to do this before lunch because everyone wants to go eat. Now it's after lunch, your stomachs are full. We can do a little bit better. So Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Awesome. I'm going to need your full engagement here for the next 20-25 minutes. Again, I want to thank you for being here. It's an honor to be here at Texas Dawah for many years. Been supporting them for over the years, and this is, I believe, we did a presentation a couple of years ago, so it's nice to be back and spend some time with you and talk about Islamic principles and investments. Again, my name is Haitham AlSayed. I'm one of the regional managers with Saturna Capital, who are the advisors and the holding company for Amana Mutual Funds. So by show of hands, how many people have heard of Amana Funds? Probably half. Okay. Well, inshallah, after the 25 minutes, all of your hands will go up, and next time someone asks you, you all raise your hands. We are the first and largest Islamic mutual fund company in the US. We have been doing this for over 30 years, alhamdulillah, providing halal investments for individuals, businesses, and non-profits, and providing halal investments in US markets and outside US markets. And whether it's a retirement plan or a 401k plan, a health savings account, an educational college planning account, for those interested in halal investments. And I'll go through it, and inshallah we'll have some time for Q&A. But before we go on, I do want to say some of this disclosures here, and this is by FINRA and the SEC that we have to disclose. Any numbers I use today, any figures are historical and not indicative of future performance. So please keep that in mind. So what we're going to discuss today is really a few things. We're going to talk about investing according to Sharia principles, go a little bit about college planning, and talk about retirement planning, and then also talk to you about Amana funds in more detail. I do want to emphasize some of this may be basic for some of you, and so I apologize in advance. But the reason is to give you an overview, and then we have our booth in the bazaar. We're here obviously all day today and all day tomorrow, and we're also staying in the Houston area till Tuesday, so we can always have a one-on-one meeting or a follow-up as well. Sounds good? So why do we want to invest? So there's a couple reasons why we invest. There's, buying a home, we want to save for Hajj, we want to put our kids to, our community is not about, going to college or not, it's when and which college, right? They're all going to school for sure. So talking about, and I'll share with you some figures about the tuition costs today and in the future on colleges, public versus private, and talk about some health savings as well. Now, some of these could be on their own. Maybe it's a one goal. Some of them could be multiple goals. So you could be wanting to go to Hajj and you have also 3 kids going to college at the same time. So if anything you take out of today, it's really about pre-planning. Start early, start early, start early. Okay, very well. So let's talk about investing for college. Public college costs rose an average about 2.8% over inflation. Does anyone know what inflation is about today? Any guess? 2.5. So roughly about 2.4, 2.5. So that tells you about 5%. And inflation is obviously, your dollar today is not your dollar tomorrow. What your dollar buys you today is not going to be the dollar that buys you tomorrow. But in college, when we talk about college, it's actually 5 times or 5% more or double than what is the percent of inflation. So you're looking at your published tuition ranges from anywhere from $10,000 to more than $33,000 per year. I'll give you an example. My nephew lives in Colorado, just finished his last year at UCLA. Because he's out of state, his out-of-state tuition was $50,000. Now, I asked my sister, did you plan for this? And she goes, alhamdulillah, yes. But if she didn't, she wouldn't have been able to put him through school and pay for part of it. Because at all costs, we want to avoid taking out loans and interest to pay for college, correct? So this graph here, it just shows about what my pointer doesn't really work here very well. But you can see the orange line is what the private, nonprofit 4-year college tuition rise versus the top blue part, which is the public 4-year college. It's almost double dipper. Now, does anyone can tell me why the public tuition rates are going higher than private? Funding, right? They don't have the funding, so what they need to do? Increase tuition, public costs. So a lot of people think private schools are sometimes more expensive. Yeah, and they are more expensive, but the rise in tuition is more in the public sector than in private. This graph shows the average debt of a student back in 1993 of around $10,000 to 2016, where the average debt has quadrupled. This is just a general education. How many of you are doctors or residents or going through medical school or have gone through medical school? Do we need to go talk about that? I mean, there's some students coming out from medical school with over $1 million in debt, right? So there's and inshallah that debt will be removed from them. But these are things you have to think about and think about early to plan for all the outcomes. Now, how do we fund for college planning? Now, a lot of you have heard, I'm sure you've heard of the 529 plan. It's the most flexible plan out there. It allows you to put a lot in. There's each state sponsored, so every state has its own rules and its own commitments to the 529 plans. However, if you see the last point is they have very few halal choices, if any at all. Some of them, the closest thing that you can get to a halal investment choice in the 529 plan is a social responsible fund. But if you dig into it and you see that, okay, it avoids alcohol, pornography, and so forth, you'll see that 25% is in financials, right? So either you have to purify it yourself or you have to, go to other options. And the other options is what's called an educational savings account. However, with the educational savings account, you're only limited to $2,000 a year that you can contribute, and if you make a certain amount, and the numbers are above here, 190 to 220 if you're filing jointly, that amount is waived. So I don't like this because it puts a lot of limitations and it takes some people off the list. But if nonetheless, important part is you can still put something in if you fall in between or below those annual figures. And then there's some other options as well, is what's called Uniform Gift to Minors account, where you can put you and your spouse $15,000 each, that's $30,000 per year into this account. Now, this is not tax deferred, or if you use it for educational purposes, it's not tax free, like an educational account or a 529 plan. However, the thing with this is that as the kid reaches the age of majority, which is 18 or 21, they can either buy a car, go to college, or pay for a wedding. So that's something you have to decide on. And there's some other options that we can talk one-off in funding for that. This graph here shows the importance of compounding. And Einstein, one of his strongest formulas he said is the power of compounding. And so this shows that if for about a cost of a fancy coffee per day, which is about $5 at Starbucks, let's not say you go on the weekends, just 20 days a month, times it by 12 months, that's about $1,000 a year. Let's say if you cut down and you save, by the age 3, that account will be about $31.94. By the time they go to age 18 at college, it'll be $35. At least you have something to pay for college, right? So the idea here is to start early, start small, compound it over the years. This is also assuming, there's no taxes taken out, especially if you use a college-friendly tax benefit deferred plan, and you use the expenses for college education. This is useful links if you want to take a picture of this. It helps you with either financial aid applications or some resources for college tuition. And also I'm happy to send it to the organization here to forward it to you guys via email as well. Now just keep in mind, any 529 plan or educational savings account or a uniform gift to minors account, those are all considered the property of the child. So when they apply for financial aid, those have to be disclosed as a property of the child, and it may affect their how much they get from financial grants. So just an FYI on that. Okay. How are we doing? Good? Okay. I didn't hear good, but I'm assuming you're all good. So maybe we need some chai. How about some chai around the house? Okay, let's talk about investing for retirement. So why we want to invest for retirement, right? I mean, it's obviously, what are the things in retirement? You need to cover expenses in retirement. What are we talking about expenses? What type of expenses do you think? Who's a brave volunteer who wants to? I have some prizes, by the way. What is it? Critical, medical, healthcare? Yes. Thank you. Whoever you are, come on and grab a gift here. So the number one expense and the number one thing on most people's minds in retirement is healthcare. Healthcare costs are going up, and they're quadrupling, if not more. We don't know what the future of the healthcare system is going to be. I give you a joke. My background, I've been spending 20 years in the wealth management groups for larger global financial firms, and alhamdulillah, this opportunity to join Amana 2.5 years ago came through, where I could leave a traditional, conventional firm and come to something like this. I had clients and I had advisors who had clients. I mean, they were net worth of 300 million cash, liquid. And I sat down with the client and I said, he's about to retire from his business, sell his business. And I said, what's on your mind? He goes, health. I go, you look healthy. He's like, no, not physically, but financially. And I said, you got to be kidding. I mean, you can open your own hospital, have your own private doctor, and this is what's the concern. But it is a concern among many, many people. They're concerned that they run out of money for health reasons. Number two is Social Security. What is the average check for Social Security, do you think, in this country is this time? 1,400? They're here? 600. It's about $1,400, okay, on average. So how much is rent in a one-bedroom apartment in Houston? 1,100. So you have a little bit. If you are on Social Security and that's all you get, at least you have. In California, you can't afford a one-bedroom 1,400. Maybe. So that tells you is that, back in the day, you had, how do you fund for retirement? You have your pension if you're loyal to the company. You had a good pension plan. Well, do those exist anymore? No. So you have your Social Security. Now, we don't know what about Social Security. The average check is $1,400. We don't know what it's going to be in the future. So the three-legged stool, the third one is you have to fund your own retirement. And that's typically through a 401k, through your employer, or an individual retirement account, or some other means. But you have to control it yourself, and you have to do it now. So this is real quick, the power of compounding again. If someone starts at age 25, and let's say they start investing for $1,000 a year, assuming a 7% return, not taking any taxes out, you see that if you invest $1,000 a year over 25 years and you retire at 65, your account will be about 218%. And I'll show you where the 7% return compared to Amana funds in just a minute. But if you started at age 35, so let's say, hey, I didn't start back then, I started at age 35, this is where your account will be. And it's never too late. If you start at 45, this is where your account will be. Are you with me? Okay, let me show you the power here of contributing what the maximum. Right now, IRA, this is last year, but this year's IRA contribution, you can do up to $6,000. But let's say you maximize your IRA contribution. So someone who started at 25, only doing $1,000 would have ended up with $218,000, but if you maximize at $5,500, you would have at 1.2 because of compounding. Right? Okay. This also shows it a different way, where someone at age 25 who only invested $10,000 out of their money, okay, up to age 65, but now their account is worth $112. Well, someone who started 10 years later at age 35 had to contribute more, $30,000. They ended up with less, right? So what's the point? Start. Come on. Early. Okay. Now, how do you fund these? So there's various ways of funding your retirement. So there's a traditional IRA. You've heard of individual retirement accounts. There's a Roth IRA. I'm happy to explain the difference. Basically, the traditional is pre-tax money goes into the account. It grows tax deferred, but when you pull it, it's taxable income, ordinary income. The Roth IRA or the Roth vehicles, whether Roth 401k, Roth, is after tax, so you get taxed on it now, and it grows tax deferred. The nice thing about the Roth is you take it out tax-free. So there's plus and minuses of doing either or both. And I'm happy to share with you guys, whether afterwards or throughout the conference the next 2 days, and explain it to you in more detail. I don't know if Michael stepped out. I think he had an emergency call. But Michael, he's with me here. He runs our 401k team. If you are a business owner, self-employed, a nonprofit, a school, we also offer our own 401k plans to business owners. And actually, there's a lot of benefits, and you can put more aside for the owners and so forth in a 401k plan as well. If you're a self-employed or business owner or medical professional. A lot of people don't know this, but in your 401k, so how many have a 401k through their employer? Okay, good. How many, keep them up, how many are taking advantage of the match? More hands went up. That was weird. Okay, good. So the match, obviously, is 100% return your money. No one's going to give you 100% guaranteed return, right? So at least make sure that you get 100% return your money on that. But the problem is you don't have halal investment options, correct? So what is the option to do? So in the anti-discrimination law, there's a clause that says that just like they have to give you time to go pray, they have to give you options for investments. It's not a forcible law. But a lot of bigger companies and a lot of HR departments are allowing for people to go to a brokerage option within the 401k, where you actually tie a separate account into the 401k. So instead of the money going to the 10 funds here that might have Anheuser-Busch or whatever, it can go to the separate account, and then from this separate account, you might be able to buy Amana. It's not 100%, it depends case by case, but I'm happy to talk about that later as well. Okay, I'm going to move on quickly. We don't need to know about the details of how much you can put in. I think I talked about that, and I only have a couple more minutes left on stage. Let's talk about... So what does it mean to invest in Islamic principles? So the qualitative filters are easy. Avoid alcohol, pornography, financial services, insurance companies, and so forth. The computer can do that. What it does come down to is the qualitative filters, and that's the quantitative filters, and that's where we come in and we specialize in over the 30 years. And so these filters are not only a process that we started a long time ago, 30 plus years ago, but it's also in line with some of the filters that the Fiqh Council of North America or the IOFI, which is the Auditing and Accounting Standards of Islamic Finance based in Bahrain. And some of the guidelines that they have is that you cannot invest in companies, and these are scholars that have, and by the way, I'm not a scholar, so don't quote me on this, but I'm happy to answer some questions that I can, and if not, I'll get you the answer. But these are scholars who have come up with these parameters, and so one of the parameters is you can't invest in a company that earns more than 5% from haram resources. So let's give you an example. So we own Apple. Apple is a large company. They have billions of cash. They have billions of cash sitting in banks earning millions of interest. But they're not in the business of financial services. This is a secondary form of income for them. And when you have people standing in line for $1,000 phones every quarter, their revenue is so much that the income they make from the interest is less than 5%. So we're allowed to buy companies like Apple and keep Apple. On the flip side, companies like Amazon and Target, if you remember, Amazon never used to sell alcohol online. They went and bought wine.com. And Target, if you remember a couple years ago, you can go, but there's no groceries. Now they have groceries. They sell alcohol. Now, even though that's less than 5% of their overall revenue, because they're in the product business, that's their primary product. It's a business. we had to sell our positions. Look where Amazon is today. So a lot of money left on the table, but we're making sure that we're trying to follow with these guidelines. People say, how about airlines? Even though the scholars have said, yes, on the equity side, you can buy airlines, but airlines sell alcohol. Well, airlines are in the business of selling seats, not alcohol. They serve alcohol. It's a secondary form of income, less than 5% of their overall revenue. And even though we're allowed to buy them, we chose not to on the equity side, just to be on as much as we can on the conservative side. And then this is why if you see the 33% total debt to market cap, what that means is how much leverage or how much debt a company can own. So if you put a 0% interest filter as far as publicly traded, and I say publicly traded, there's only 1 or 2 companies that anybody can buy globally that don't have cash or don't borrow to grow. Because a lot of companies either have cash on hand or they merge and they borrow. So the limit is, 33%. So we don't go buy at 30% because if they get merged or they want to grow, they have to be off the list. Our funds are typically between 10 to 15% in leverage. And that's why in 2008, when the market was down 47%, our funds were only down half that. The reason why it was a financial crisis, we don't own any financials, and we don't have highly leveraged companies. And so people were like, which funds are doing good in 2008? And that's why, what percentage of our $3.5 billion we manage is from non-Muslims? Any guess? How much? Don't be shy, you said something. 2? Anybody else? 80%. Almost 80% of the funds are from non-Muslims. So what does that tell you? That tells you they're not with us because they're Islamic, they're with us because of performance. So alhamdulillah, we have our performance, we have the Islamic side, as well as we're a social responsible fund. So we really fit in three buckets. And I'm going to move along just to spare some time here. Just to let you know, so Saturna Capital hires an independent Sharia-compliant auditor based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, where we have an office there for research and analysts, and that's where Islamic finance is hub. But we also have an independent Sharia-compliant auditor that's also based in Kuala Lumpur that audits us, and it's on our website that we are in compliance. So with that, real quick about the Amana funds. We offer, as I told you, all the services from retirement, educational, health, savings account. We have 4 funds. Our income fund basically is based on high-paying dividend stock funds, U.S. market, large cap, which means companies with over $2 billion in revenue and up. And that's where we focus on, is we believe these companies can weather the storm, especially these days. We have the growth fund, which is mostly in healthcare and technology, about 60% of the fund, healthcare technology. This fund, last year, the S&P market was down 4.5%. This fund did a positive 2.25% net of expenses. And then we have the developing world, which is outside the US, also Islamically filtered. And then the last fund, it's called the participation fund. It's more conservative. It's an Islamic bond equivalent, and it's based on sukuk. I don't know if any of you have heard of the term sukuk, but basically what makes the sukuk halal is there's an asset, there's a profit and loss sharing of the asset. There is no guarantees like a bond, and there's a fatwa, religious review. So the goal of the fund is to preserve capital and some income. Target returns about 3 to 5%, and I'm happy to talk about it in more detail afterwards as well. Let's see here. Obviously, anything that you invest in has some risk. Just talk about the performance here real quick. This is back in 2008. If you look at the gray graph is the market going down. 47%, our funds did fairly well, relatively speaking. Then we had a nice peak. And so when the market goes up, so remember, we don't have financials. So when interest rates goes up, financials go up, the market is going to like that. We're not participating on the upside. But on the bottom side, when they go down, we don't participate either. So that's the beauty of us not investing in financials. You can see here on a 10-year average, the funds are 10 to 11% net every year the last 10 years, including 08 market. If you look at a 5 and 3 year, they've been anywhere between 4% to 15%. And I'm just being rushed here because I know my time is up. But do we have any one or two questions I can answer in general? And I appreciate your time. And before I say, I don't know if I think my wife and kids are here. Usually I do this alone around the country, but this time I brought them, so I want to thank them for their support as always. But thank you again. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to take one or two. Yes, sir. Can you speak louder? Great question. So I believe the question is there any cap to start? Our funds are very low entry. It's $100 per fund if it's a retirement account, and it's $250 if it's non-retirement. If it's a Sukuk fund, because it's a little bit different category, it's a $5,000 minimum requirement on the Sukuk fund. Okay, with that, Jazakallah khair, thank you so much. Again, we have our booth in the bazaar. We're here today and tomorrow. We're also around till Tuesday in Houston area. We can meet one-on-one. I appreciate your time, and thank you very much.